I thought an abandoned hospital was the one place where life had long been erased. But once I stepped inside, I realized the empty beds were never truly vacant. I never imagined I would work in a place like this. When I got the call to take a night shift job at an abandoned hospital, I figured it was just a temporary gig, something to get me through a few months. The hospital had been closed for years, and the staff that remained were mostly there just to keep the place from falling into total disrepair. But I didn't have many options, and something about the job intrigued me. It wasn't until my first night there that I realized something was very wrong. The place felt off from the moment I walked in. The walls of the hospital seemed to hold on to memories, and the air was thick with the kind of silence only an abandoned place could have. The dim light flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows down long, empty hallways. It felt like the building was holding its breath, waiting for something or someone. The hospital had been shut down, but as I made my way through the dark halls, it was almost like I wasn't alone. The rooms were empty, but the beds were neatly made, as if they were still expecting someone. That first night I had the strangest dream. In it, I was walking through the hospital, but everything was different. The rooms weren't abandoned. They were filled with doctors, nurses, and patients. The hallways were busy, voices echoed, and the scent of antiseptic lingered in the air. It felt like I was walking through a time capsule, like I had somehow stepped back into the hospital's heyday. But the most unsettling part, the beds. Every single one had someone lying in it, patients hooked up to machines, the faint sound of heartbeats, soft murmurs. But when I looked closely, I realized something was wrong. The faces of the patients were blurry, indistinct, like I couldn't quite make them out, even though they were right there in front of me. I woke up in a cold sweat. The dream left me shaken, but I brushed it off. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. After all, I was in an old hospital. It was bound to be creepy, right? Still, something about it stuck with me. The next night, I had the same dream, and the next. Each time, it felt more vivid, more real. The beds were always the same, empty yet somehow filled. It was as if I wasn't just seeing the past in my dreams, but the present too. Then one night I heard something. It was soft at first, a faint sound like footsteps down a long corridor. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the wind or some old pipes rattling. But then it happened again. This time it was closer. I got up from my desk and walked out into the hallway, straining to hear. The footsteps were unmistakable, slow and deliberate, coming from the direction of the old ward. My heart raced as I made my way toward the sound. When I reached the ward, the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, expecting to find something or someone, but there was nothing. Just the same sterile, empty room. No footprints, no sign of life. But then I saw it. One of the beds was made differently. A fresh set of sheets, folded neatly as if someone had just been lying there. But no one had been there, not that I knew of anyway. I turned back, feeling a cold shiver crawl up my spine. The hospital was quiet again, but something felt different now. The air felt heavier. The silence wasn't just a lack of sound. It was the kind of silence that seemed to hold a secret, a whisper just out of reach. Something was wrong here, and the more time I spent in this place, the more I realized it wasn't just the hospital that was abandoned. It was the memories, the people, the lives that had once been lived here. I was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, they weren't gone, and they weren't done with this place either. The hospital was silent again, or at least it seemed silent. The kind of silence you only get in places that have been left behind. A silence that feels too thick, too heavy, like it's waiting for something to happen. As the days turned into weeks, I got used to the emptiness. The late-night shifts became routine, and the hospital, though eerie, started to feel somewhat familiar. I'd walk the halls, check the old wards, and make sure the equipment was in place. There were times when the lights flickered, but that was nothing new. It was just an old building. But every night, as the clock struck midnight, something would change. It started as a faint noise, just barely audible at first, a creak here, a rustle there. Maybe it was the building settling, maybe it was just the wind, but the more I heard it, the more I realized it was no ordinary noise. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate. It sounded like footsteps. I thought I was imagining it at first, a product of my own growing unease. After all, I'd heard stories from the old staff. Some of them had worked here when it was still active. They'd joke about how the place was haunted, that some of the patients never really left. But it was all in good fun, right? Just urban legends, nothing more. But the footsteps grew louder. One night I was sitting at my desk in the security office, going over some old patient files. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead was the only sound in the room, and the clock on the wall ticked slowly, each second stretching into the next. Then came the noise. A light tap at first, almost like the sound of someone walking lightly across the floor. I froze. I looked around the empty office. Nothing. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor as I made my way to the door. The hallway was dark. The only light coming from the emergency exit signs casting a dull glow. I walked down the hallway, my shoes tapping against the worn tile floor. The sound of my own footsteps almost drowned out the faint noises coming from further down the hall. The footsteps were closer now. They were coming from the east wing, the oldest part of the hospital, the part that had been closed off for years. I knew I shouldn't go in there. It was off limits, but curiosity gnawed at me. I couldn't resist. I made my way toward the wing, the noise growing louder with each step I took. It was like someone was walking just ahead of me, but when I turned the corner, no one was there. I stopped at the entrance to the east wing. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The hallway was dark, but I could see the faint outline of the old rooms. There was a faint scent of disinfectant in the air, mixed with something else, something old, something musty, like the scent of rotting wood. It was all wrong. I hesitated for a moment, but then the sound came again, echoing through the hallway. I stepped forward, my heart racing. The sound of footsteps was now accompanied by a soft murmur, like someone was whispering. It was faint at first, like distant voices carried on the wind. But as I walked deeper into the hallway, the whispering grew clearer, almost as if it was coming from the very walls. I was no longer sure if this was real or if my mind was playing tricks on me, but I had to find out. I turned a corner and came to a door that had been left ajar. The whispering was louder now, almost urgent, as though it was calling to me. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was cold, even colder than the rest of the hospital. I could see my breath in the air, swirling in the dim light. The room was exactly what I had expected: old hospital furniture, rusted equipment, dusty shelves, but something was off. There in the far corner of the room was a bed. It was a metal-framed hospital bed, the kind I had seen in other parts of the hospital, but this one had something different about it. It wasn't empty. There was something or someone lying under the thin, white sheets. At first, I thought it was just the shadow playing tricks on my eyes, but as I moved closer, I saw it clearly. A figure, a woman lying motionless in the bed. Her face was pale, her hair dark and matted. She was completely still, like she was asleep, but I could feel it. The air around me was charged with an undeniable tension. My first instinct was to leave, to turn around and run. But something kept me rooted to the spot. It wasn't just her presence, it was the overwhelming sense of wrongness in the room. The figure in the bed wasn't just a patient, it was as if it had always been there, waiting for someone to find it. And that's when I noticed something else. The bed had a name tag on it. The name was familiar. It was one of the names I had seen in the hospital records. But this patient, this woman, had died years ago. She had been listed as one of the last to be treated in the hospital before it was shut down. Yet there she was, alive. Or was it something else? I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. As I turned to leave, I heard it again, the sound of footsteps now directly behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. Nothing but the eerie stillness of the hospital. I couldn't stay any longer. I ran out of the room, my breath coming in short gasps. The whispering had stopped and the footsteps had faded. But as I made my way back through the dark hallways, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The hospital was silent again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like it was hiding something that had been there all along. I had to find out what was going on. I couldn't just walk away, but with every step I couldn't help but wonder, what was it I had just seen, and what else was waiting in the shadows? I thought I had seen everything this place could throw at me, but I was wrong. The worst was yet to come, and it was going to be far worse than anything I could have imagined. The days after that night felt different. The silence in the hospital seemed even more suffocating, and the darkness in the corners of the hallways, which I had gotten used to, now felt like it was watching me. It wasn't just the creepy shadows or the odd sounds I'd been hearing. Something had changed in the very fabric of the hospital. The air was thicker, heavier. It was as though the building itself had come alive, and it wasn't going to let me leave anytime soon. The next night, I couldn't shake the image of that woman lying in the bed. I kept thinking about her, the way she seemed to be waiting for me. Her name, written on the tag, had lingered in my mind all day, gnawing at me. I had to know more. I had to understand how she was connected to the hospital's dark history. The records I had access to weren't enough. I had seen the name on the tag before, but not much more than that. It was just another lost patient in a long line of forgotten souls. But something about her struck me as different, like I had seen her face somewhere before. Maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but I couldn't ignore the pull to find out the truth. I decided to search the hospital's archives again, hoping to find something that might explain what was going on. The only problem was, the archives were located in the basement of the hospital, in a part that had been sealed off years ago. The building's old infrastructure made it dangerous, and there were rumors that the basement itself was cursed. But what other choice did I have? That night, I grabbed my flashlight, taking one last look at the empty hallways before heading down into the basement. The elevator creaked as it descended, the low hum of the cables echoing in the small shaft. The air in the basement was cold, colder than the rest of the hospital, and there was a thick layer of dust over everything. The scent of mildew hung heavy in the air, and the walls felt damp, like they were sweating the remnants of years gone by. I found the old file room, and as I pushed open the heavy metal door, it groaned in protest as though it didn't want to reveal its secrets. Inside, it was just as I remembered from my earlier search, stacks of dusty boxes filled with patient records, some more decayed than others. It was clear that the place hadn't been touched in years. The faint beam of my flashlight swept over the room, illuminating old files, most of them falling apart at the edges. My eyes skimmed over the names, but there was one name that caught my attention immediately. It was her, the woman from the bed. The file was worn, the paper yellowed with age. Her name was Jennifer Hall, and according to the records, she had been admitted to the hospital in the late 1980s. But there was something strange about her case. Her records ended abruptly, with no discharge date or any mention of her condition after the initial admission. In fact, the file seemed incomplete. There were gaps, missing information, but the strangest part was what I found next. Her cause of death was listed as unknown, but there was no autopsy report or any indication of what happened to her after her last recorded visit. I couldn't believe it. She had died here. But the records were incomplete. No one ever came to claim her body, and no one seemed to care. I couldn't understand how something like that could happen, how someone could just disappear like that without any trace. Was this woman still alive, or had something else taken her place? I stared at the file for what felt like hours, my mind racing. There were too many unanswered questions, too many gaps. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something I hadn't discovered yet. I needed answers. As I was about to put the file back, I heard it again. That sound, the soft whispering, the same one I'd heard in the hospital hallways. But this time it was louder. It was coming from somewhere deeper in the basement. I stood up, my heart racing. The flashlight flickered, casting shadows on the walls as I cautiously made my way toward the source of the sound. It was coming from a part of the basement I hadn't seen before, a hallway that was hidden behind a stack of old filing cabinets. I had never noticed this hallway before, but there was no mistaking it now. The whispering was louder, more urgent, almost as if someone or something was calling to me. I followed the sound, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The air grew colder the further I went down the hallway, and the whispering seemed to follow me. As if it was right behind me, brushing against my ear. I rounded a corner, and that's when I saw it. There was another door, a heavy wooden door hidden behind a stack of boxes. It was ajar, just barely, and as I pushed it open, I was hit by a wave of freezing air. The room inside was small, barely bigger than a closet, but in the middle of the room there was another bed, and lying on it was Jennifer Hall. But this wasn't the same woman I had seen earlier. This woman was different. Her skin was pale, her hair long and tangled, and her eyes were wide open, staring at me. There was no life in them, just an endless emptiness. And the worst part, she was still breathing. I backed away slowly, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the door. The woman didn't move, didn't speak. She just lay there, staring at me as if she were waiting for something. But what? Why was she here, and why was she still alive? I didn't have time to find out. I turned and ran, my heart hammering in my chest as I fled from the basement, from the whispers, from the woman who shouldn't have been there. When I finally made it back to the security office, I locked the door behind me, breathing heavily. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just uncovered something far worse than I could have ever imagined. Jennifer Hall wasn't the only one here. She wasn't the only one still trapped in this place. And whatever was keeping her here, whatever was keeping them all here, wasn't going to let me leave. The truth is, once you open that door, once you look into the darkness, you can't unsee what's lurking there, and I was about to discover that the hospital's secrets were far from over. I couldn't sleep that night. The image of Jennifer Hall's lifeless eyes kept playing in my mind, refusing to leave me. The woman in the basement, she wasn't supposed to be there. I had seen her file. She had died years ago, and yet there she was, breathing, watching me. Something wasn't right. And whatever it was, I could feel it tightening around me, closing in with every minute I stayed in this place. I tried to push it all out of my mind, telling myself I needed to focus. I couldn't let the fear take over. I had to finish my shift, and then I could go home. But the strange occurrences didn't stop. In fact, they seemed to escalate as the night wore on. It wasn't long before I heard it again, the footsteps. This time, they were unmistakable. They weren't just random sounds in the dark or the creaks of the building settling. These footsteps were deliberate, measured, like someone was walking slowly down the hallway just outside my office. I stood up, my heart pounding. The air around me felt thick, and the cold was settling deep into my bones. I stepped cautiously into the hallway, keeping to the shadows, my breath shallow in the silence. The footsteps were louder now, coming from the direction of the east wing, where the old rooms were. I had already been there earlier, but now the hallway felt different, darker, more oppressive. The lights flickered again, casting long, twisted shadows across the walls. I walked toward the east wing, trying to steady my breathing, but every step felt heavier than the last. The floor beneath me creaked with every movement, and the whispers I had heard before seemed to echo in the distance. I reached the entrance to the east wing. And it hit me, there was something deeply wrong about this part of the hospital. It wasn't just abandoned, it was forgotten. The doors were old, rusted, and barely hung on their hinges. The floors were covered in dust, the walls cracked and peeling. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore, the faint smell of something rotting, like something had been left here for far too long. I stepped inside and the temperature immediately dropped. The air was cold. Too cold for a building that was supposed to be heated. My breath formed clouds of vapor in the air, and I shivered. I moved deeper into the hallway, following the sound of the footsteps, which now seemed to be growing closer, like they were waiting for me. I came to the first room, the door cracked open, and as I pushed it slightly, I caught a glimpse of something, or rather someone, standing in the dark. It was a figure, tall and imposing, but there was no movement. I couldn't tell who it was or what it was doing, but the mere presence of it sent a chill down my spine. I stepped into the room, a flashlight shaking in my hand. The figure remained still, casting a long shadow on the floor. My heart raced. I called out softly, but there was no response. I moved closer, and as I did, the figure turned toward me. Its face was a blur, just a smear of color, like it was out of focus. But what really caught my attention were the eyes, empty black voids, as if the figure had no soul, no life. I backed away quickly, feeling the cold, oppressive air closing in around me. My pulse thudded in my ears as I turned and fled from the room. I didn't stop to look back, didn't stop until I was back in the main hallway, gasping for air. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of this place. But as I reached for the door to the security office, I heard something behind me. Footsteps, and this time they were faster, almost chasing me. I spun around, the flashlight beam catching the silhouette of the figure now standing in the doorway. But this time, I saw it clearly. The figure wasn't just a shadow, it was human, the same woman I had seen in the basement, the one who shouldn't have been alive. She was standing right there watching me, her eyes dark and hollow. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. The figure didn't say anything, but there was a presence to it, a feeling that I was being drawn into something I didn't understand, something I couldn't escape. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, disappearing into the darkness, leaving nothing but the echo of its footsteps behind. I stumbled into the security office, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking, my head spinning. What was happening? What was going on in this place? The walls felt like they were closing in, and I couldn't escape the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for me to uncover its secrets. The hours dragged on, but I couldn't shake the images of what I had seen. The woman's face, the shadowy figure, the whispers that still echoed in my mind. The hospital was full of secrets, secrets that it didn't want me to uncover. And the more I searched, the more I realized that this wasn't just some abandoned building. This was a place that had been left to rot for a reason, and I had a feeling I wasn't supposed to be here. As the clock ticked closer to the end of my shift, I couldn't help but wonder, was I meant to discover these secrets, or was I just another lost soul wandering through the halls of this cursed hospital? I thought I had seen the worst this hospital had to offer. But then I saw her again, the woman from the basement, and this time she wasn't alone. The days dragged on after that night. The hospital felt like it was closing in on me. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound sharper. The nights were longer. The whispers I'd heard, the footsteps echoing in the distance, they were no longer just figments of my imagination. I was starting to wonder if I had truly lost my grip on reality, or if something far darker was at play. The woman from the basement, Jennifer Hall, had been haunting my every thought. I couldn't shake the image of her lifeless eyes, her still body in that dark room. She should have been gone. She should have been a memory, a name on a chart, but she wasn't. She was still here in the hospital, in the shadows, and she wasn't the only one. The figure I had seen in the hallway, the one with the empty black eyes, had vanished just as suddenly as it appeared. But something had changed. There was a palpable shift in the air around me, a feeling that something was waiting, watching, and it wasn't going to let me leave without unveiling the truth. The hospital had a secret, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, it seemed determined to make sure I uncovered it. One evening, after my shift, I decided to go back down to the basement, the place where everything had started. I couldn't get Jennifer Hall out of my head, and I needed to find out more about her. I had to know what happened to her, why she was still here. Maybe I could find some answers in the records. I entered the basement, my footsteps echoing in the cold, silent halls. The place had an oppressive feeling, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The stale air smelled of mold and decay, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer as I moved deeper into the basement. The only sound was the low hum of the fluorescent lights above, flickering intermittently, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. I moved quickly to the old records room. As I opened the door, a sharp, cold gust of air hit my face, causing me to shiver. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, landing on the old filing cabinets. I grabbed the folder with Jennifer Hall's name on it again, hoping to find some missing information that might explain why she was still here. As I flipped through the papers, I found something that sent a chill down my spine. There were more details, but they didn't make sense. Her death was listed as a medical anomaly, and there were several notations from various doctors, all of which were vague and incomplete. What caught my eye, though, was a note from a senior doctor dated just a few weeks before the hospital closed. It was short and to the point. Patient 112, Jennifer Hall, is to be monitored for an unusual form of prolonged life. Her condition remains unexplainable. Prolonged life, what did that mean? I quickly scanned the rest of the file, but there was no other explanation. The records abruptly stopped after that. No official cause of death, no conclusion. It was as if the hospital had decided to just forget about her and let her fade into the shadows. Suddenly I heard a noise, a soft tapping like fingernails drumming against metal. My heart skipped a beat. It was coming from the hallway. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. I turned off the flashlight, pressing my back against the filing cabinet, straining to hear. It was the footsteps again. I could hear them clearly now. Slow, deliberate steps getting closer. The unmistakable sound of boots on the concrete floor. But these footsteps didn't belong to me, and they didn't belong to anyone I knew. I gripped the file tighter in my hand. My first instinct was to run, to get out of there, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, my eyes fixed on the dark hallway outside the room. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. I couldn't see anyone, but I could feel them. It was as if the air around me was thickening, like something was closing in. Then a voice, a whisper so faint I almost couldn't make it out, but it was there. "You shouldn't have come back." I stood there, my heart racing. That voice, it was familiar. It was Jennifer Hall's voice. It was the voice from my dreams. The voice that had haunted me since the night I first saw her. Without thinking, I grabbed the file and ran out of the room, sprinting down the hallway toward the elevator. But as I passed the old wards, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. There, standing in the doorway of one of the rooms, was Jennifer Hall. She was looking at me, but her eyes were no longer lifeless. They were filled with something else, something dark, something knowing. She didn't speak. She just stood there, watching me, her body motionless, like she was waiting for me to make the next move. And then I saw it, the shadow behind her. It wasn't just her anymore. There were others standing in the hallway, figures dressed in hospital gowns, their faces twisted in silent screams. They were moving slowly, one by one, stepping out of the rooms, following her. I could feel my breath quicken as panic set in. These weren't patients who had come and gone. These were the souls who had been trapped here, trapped by whatever dark force had taken root in this place. Jennifer stepped forward, her gaze never leaving mine. She took one slow, deliberate step, then another, until she was standing right in front of me. Her eyes seemed to pierce through me, like she could see everything I was trying to hide. "You've seen too much," she whispered. "You can't leave now." I stumbled backward, but my legs wouldn't move. I couldn't run. The shadows in the hallway were closing in around me, and I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I turned to find one of the other patients standing behind me, their face twisted in agony. The whispers grew louder, the footsteps faster. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, Jennifer's voice echoed in my mind. "You have to choose." I didn't know what she meant, but it didn't matter. I had to escape. I had to get out of there before it was too late. But as I turned to flee, the hallway stretched on forever, the exit always just out of reach. I could hear the footsteps behind me, but no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't outrun them. This was no longer just a hospital. It was a prison, and I was its next inmate. Some nightmares you wake up from, others, they wake up with you and they refuse to let go. I didn't sleep much after that night. How could I? The image of Jennifer Hall's face, the hollow eyes, the cold whispers. They haunted me even in the safety of my own apartment. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw her. It wasn't just her face, it was the faces of others, all of them staring back at me. And then there were the dreams. Every time I closed my eyes, the hospital was waiting for me, waiting to drag me back in. At first, I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was just the stress, just my mind trying to make sense of the unspeakable things I'd seen. But the dreams grew more vivid, more real, until they blurred the line between what was real and what was imagined. I would find myself walking down the same dark corridors, the same empty rooms. The beds were always empty, but the shadows seemed to move, shift, like they were waiting. I would hear the whispers again, low and steady, but this time they were louder, as if the hospital itself was speaking to me, telling me something. The strangest part, I would see Jennifer again, standing at the end of the hall, her head tilted slightly, as if she were waiting for me to catch up. Every time I tried to approach her, the hallway would stretch on endlessly, and the whispers would turn into screams, echoing off the walls. I woke up gasping for air, drenched in sweat. I couldn't tell where the dream ended and reality began anymore. I hadn't been back to the hospital since that night, but I knew I couldn't stay away forever. It was like a compulsion, an invisible force pulling me back. That night, I decided to go back. I had to see it for myself, whether I was losing my mind or if something far more sinister was at play. I didn't know what answers I was searching for, but I had to find them. I returned to the hospital after hours, the usual dread settling in the pit of my stomach as I approached the building. It was worse tonight, though. The air felt thicker, colder. The silence that greeted me as I walked through the doors was absolute unnerving. The hospital was still as lifeless as it had been before, but now everything felt wrong. The shadows seemed darker, the silence louder. It was as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting. I made my way to the East Wing, the old part of the hospital where I had seen Jennifer. The floors creaked under my weight as I walked, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. I passed the old rooms, the rooms I had come to know too well, and finally came to the one where I had found her. The door was slightly ajar. I hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. The room inside was as it had been the last time I saw it, but this time it was different. It was darker. The shadows seemed to creep further into the room, and the cold and unnatural chill wrapped itself around me. But Jennifer wasn't lying in the bed. No, she was standing by the window, facing away from me. I stepped inside, my heart hammering in my chest. "Jennifer," I whispered, my voice shaky. She didn't move. She just stood there looking out the window, her back turned to me. The air felt suffocating, heavy with something I couldn't quite place. I took a few more steps, but as soon as I got closer, something shifted. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in on me, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread settle over me. And then I heard it, the whispering. It started soft like it had before, but it grew louder, more insistent, until it was deafening. I couldn't understand what it was saying, but I could feel it. It was all around me, in the walls, in the air, inside my head. "Leave now." The voice was unmistakable. It was Jennifer's. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The temperature in the room plummeted, and I felt my skin crawl with the icy grip of terror. She slowly turned toward me, her eyes still hollow, but this time there was something else, something darker. "You shouldn't have come back," she said, her voice cold, distant, and filled with a hollow echo. My legs felt like jelly as I stepped back, my pulse quickening. I couldn't tear my eyes away from hers. The air grew heavier, the room closing in on me, as though the walls were shifting and breathing. "Why are you here?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Jennifer didn't answer right away. She just stood there, her gaze piercing through me like she could see everything I was trying to hide. The whispering grew louder again, swirling around us, but I couldn't make out the words. The hospital felt alive in a way it never had before. And then, just as quickly as she had appeared, she turned back to the window. I couldn't see her face anymore, but I could feel her presence like a shadow hanging over me. The air felt thick, like something was pressing down on me from all sides. I couldn't breathe. Suddenly I saw something, an image flashed in my mind like a memory, but it wasn't mine. I saw a dark figure standing in the shadows at the end of the hallway. It was tall, humanoid, but it wasn't human. Its face was obscured, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching, waiting. I couldn't move. My body was frozen in place, the cold seeping into my bones. The shadow moved closer, its footsteps slow but deliberate, each one echoing in the silence. And then I understood. This wasn't just a haunted hospital. This place was a prison, not for the patients, but for something else. Something that was feeding off the fear, the confusion, the lost souls that wandered here. Jennifer Hall, the other patients, they were all part of it, and now so was I. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me. I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The whispering returned, louder than ever, as I felt something move behind me. The shadow was getting closer, and I realized then that I wasn't going to leave, not unless it wanted me to. There are places in the dark that should never be opened, and there are secrets buried so deep that once you uncover them, you'll wish you hadn't. I don't know how much time passed before I managed to get out of that room. The shadow had been so close, I could almost feel its cold breath against my skin. I stumbled backward, almost tripping over my own feet, and somehow in that panic I found the door. It creaked open with an effort, and I practically threw myself into the hallway. My breath came in ragged gasps as I looked back over my shoulder, half expecting to see that dark figure right behind me. But it was gone, or at least I thought it was. I stood there in the middle of the hallway, my hands shaking, my heart racing. The whispering had stopped, but the tension remained, thick and suffocating. The hospital had never felt more alive, or maybe it was more accurate to say that it had never felt more like it was alive because of me. Every corner I turned seemed to get darker, and every step I took echoed loudly in the empty hallways. The place felt like it was closing in on me, pressing against my chest with each breath. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to run, to leave this place behind and never come back. But the other part, the part that I couldn't quiet, told me that I needed to keep going. I had to find out what was happening, what was keeping Jennifer and the others here. I had to find out the truth, no matter what it cost me. I made my way toward the back of the hospital, where I knew there were areas I hadn't explored before. I'd walked the main halls, the east wing, the basement, but there were other places I had been told to avoid. Those areas were locked off. Their doors rusted shut, with old, faded signs warning of structural damage and contamination. But now they didn't seem like mere warnings. They felt like barriers that were holding something back. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to find the locked door, the one that everyone had warned me about, the one that no one was supposed to go near. As I passed the janitor's closet, I noticed something, a key. It was on the floor near the door, half hidden under a pile of cleaning supplies. At first, I thought it was just another abandoned key, one that had been dropped long ago, but when I picked it up, my heart skipped a beat. It was old, like the rest of the hospital, but there was something different about it. I didn't know why I took it. Maybe I was just desperate, or maybe the hospital had already wormed its way into my head. But I stuffed the key into my pocket and headed toward the last hallway, the one I had avoided all this time. When I reached the end, I found what I was looking for, an old metal door, worn and battered with time, and a sign that read, "Authorized personnel only." I slipped the key from my pocket, my fingers trembling as I slid it into the lock. The door creaked open with a loud groan, and I stepped into what was a part of the hospital that felt like it had been untouched for decades. The air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of something decayed hung in the air. The floor was covered in a layer of grime, the walls cracked and peeling, but there was something else, something more unsettling. The room was cold, not just regular cold, but the kind of cold that made your skin crawl. Like the temperature had been artificially lowered to make you feel uncomfortable. I walked deeper into the room, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, revealing what appeared to be old storage closets, hospital equipment that had long been forgotten, and unused beds, more beds than I had ever seen in one place. They were neatly arranged in rows, all of them unmade, some of the sheets torn, others stained. But there was something even more disturbing about them. There were no labels on any of the beds, no identification. It was as if they had been left behind in haste, abandoned by whoever had worked here. But then in the corner of the room, something caught my eye, a file cabinet. It was partially open, and the papers inside looked as though they had been scattered by a violent wind, with a few files hanging half out of the drawers. Curiosity got the best of me, and I walked over to it. As I pulled out one of the files, I felt my stomach drop. The name on the top sheet was the same one I had seen before, Jennifer Hall. I flipped through the file quickly, my eyes scanning the pages. There were more details here, things that I hadn't seen before, but then my fingers froze as I came across something that made my blood run cold. The last entry was dated 2 months ago. The note read, "Patient 112, Jennifer Hall still alive. Unexplained condition, no sign of aging. Cells regenerating at a rapid rate. Unnatural recovery time. Unable to explain medically. Further observation required." My heart skipped a beat. 2 months ago, that couldn't be right. The hospital had been shut down for over a decade. How could there still be an entry about Jennifer Hall? Suddenly, the room felt even colder, the air more suffocating. My flashlight flickered. I turned around quickly, half expecting to see the shadow again, but there was nothing. Just the rows of empty beds, the cold silence, but something was different. The whispering had started again, faint at first, then louder, growing closer. I looked toward the back of the room, where the shadows seemed to be moving. A figure stepped forward. It was Jennifer Hall, but this time she wasn't alone. There were others, patients, some in hospital gowns, others with faces twisted in pain. They were slowly moving toward me, their eyes wide and empty, their mouths open in silent screams. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. No, this isn't happening. But it was. They were all here, every patient who had been lost to the hospital, every soul that had been forgotten, and now they were waiting for something from me, waiting for me to understand what had happened to them, what had kept them in this place. And as Jennifer's figure moved closer, I could hear her voice in my head again. "You shouldn't have come back, but now that you have, there's no turning back." I turned and fled from the room, the whispers growing louder, the shadows closing in around me. The hospital had claimed its next victim, and I was just another lost soul in its maze. Once you've crossed the threshold into the unknown, the real terror begins, and there's no escaping what's already followed you. I ran, I didn't know where I was going, I didn't care. My heart raced in my chest, and my legs burned with the effort to move faster, but it wasn't enough. The whispers followed me down the halls, growing louder, more insistent, and with every turn I could feel them closing in. I was being chased by something I couldn't see, but I could feel it. Like a heavy presence right behind me, pushing me forward, pushing me deeper into the heart of the hospital. I didn't stop running until I reached the main lobby. The place was silent again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I pressed my back against the cold, cracked walls, panting heavily, trying to gather my thoughts. My mind was a mess. The images of the figures of the patients were burned into my mind. Jennifer Hall's empty eyes. The other faces twisted in agony, all of them watching me. Waiting, what was this place? What had I uncovered? And why was I still here? I wasn't alone, that much was certain now. The building was alive, and not in the way it had once been. It was a place of lost souls, souls that refused to leave, souls that were trapped in an endless loop, and I had walked right into the middle of it. I took a deep breath and forced myself to think. I had to get out. But the hospital was not just a building. It was a prison, one that I was trapped in. The exits that had once been clear now seemed like a cruel illusion, distant and unreachable. Each hallway looked the same empty rooms, the same dark corners. There was no way out. I walked down the main hallway slowly, my eyes darting from side to side, searching for an escape. The silence was oppressive, but I could still feel the weight of the hospital pressing down on me, suffocating me. My flashlight flickered once more before completely going out, plunging me into darkness. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I could hear something, soft at first but unmistakable, the sound of breathing, slow, deliberate. I wasn't alone. I fumbled for my flashlight, my fingers trembling as I tried to turn it back on, but it was useless. I could hear the breathing getting closer, the slow, rhythmic sound of someone or something moving toward me. I turned and bolted in the opposite direction, my heart pounding in my chest, but the darkness seemed to stretch farther ahead of me. I was running blind, crashing into walls, tripping over debris, but I couldn't stop. I had to get out. And then, as if the building itself was mocking me, I stumbled into a room I hadn't seen before. It was a small office filled with old, abandoned equipment. There was an old desk in the center, covered in dust, and a few papers scattered around. But in the corner of the room, there was something that caught my eye, a cabinet, just barely visible in the dim light. Without thinking, I moved toward it. As I approached, the whispers returned, louder now, more frantic. My breath came in short gasps, and my hands shook as I opened the cabinet door. Inside, there were several old files, more patient records, some of them yellowed with age. I didn't care about the records. What I cared about was the notebook sitting on top of the pile. It was small, leather-bound, and looked out of place among the rest of the paperwork. I pulled it out and opened it to the first page. It wasn't like the other files. This one was different. It wasn't a record. It was a journal. I started reading, and the words hit me like a punch to the gut. The journal belonged to Dr. Albertson, one of the lead physicians at the hospital. The first few pages were filled with notes on patient care, treatments, and diagnoses. But as I flipped through the pages, things started to change. His writing became more frantic, more disjointed. The experiments must continue. The patients are showing signs of recovery, but not the kind we anticipated. They're healing too quickly. Their bodies aren't aging. They're not dying, but they're changing. I need to test more. I need to understand how far this can go. I need to see how much I can push them before they stop being human. Jennifer Hall is the key. She is the first one who showed signs of something different. I need to keep her alive. I need to study her, but what if she's not alive at all? What if she never was? I flipped through more pages, and the entries grew darker, more chaotic. They're all here, all of them. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I see it clearly. They're not patients, they're experiments, and the hospital is their cage. My blood ran cold. I dropped the journal, my hands shaking. The whispers in the room grew louder, as if they were closing in on me. I glanced at the door, but before I could move, the temperature in the room dropped. I turned around slowly, my breath coming out in shaky gasps, and there she was, Jennifer Hall, standing in the doorway, her face twisted into a grimace, her eyes empty and dark. "You've seen too much," she whispered, her voice eerily calm. "Now you're part of it." I stumbled backward, my body slamming into the desk behind me. The air in the room felt suffocating, thick with the weight of the things I had uncovered. The whispers rose into a deafening cacophony, and the figures that had once been confined to my nightmares began to appear in the corners of the room. They were standing there, just outside the circle of light, their faces distorted, their eyes filled with the same emptiness that Jennifer's had. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, I was trapped, and I realized then there was no escape. The hospital had claimed me, and there would be no leaving until it had gotten everything it wanted. They told me the hospital was abandoned. They told me the patients were long gone, but nothing about this place was what I had been told, and now I was about to discover the final piece of the puzzle. The room was closing in on me. I could feel the walls shift, the air pressing against my chest, suffocating me. Jennifer's hollow eyes bore into me as the whispers in the shadows became a deafening roar, like 1,000 voices rising in unison, all urging me to listen. To understand, but what was there to understand? The hospital had already shown me its horrors, its secrets, and its twisted experiments, and now I had become part of it. I had unknowingly stepped into something far beyond what I was prepared for. I tried to breathe, tried to steady myself, but every movement felt sluggish, as if the air itself was draining my strength. Jennifer's figure loomed in the doorway, her eyes never leaving me. The other figures, the patients, stood in the corners of the room, their faces contorted in grotesque expressions. Some of them were still wearing the tattered hospital gowns, others completely disfigured, their bodies twisted by whatever experiments had been conducted on them. They didn't speak, but their presence was a constant weight on my chest, pushing me deeper into fear. "You don't belong here," Jennifer whispered, her voice low and emotionless. "You never did." The words hit me harder than I expected, like a punch to the gut. I had been searching for answers, trying to uncover the truth, but now it felt like I had become part of something much darker than I could have ever imagined. I wasn't just in a haunted hospital anymore. I wasn't just dealing with restless souls. I had stumbled upon something far more sinister. "You see," Jennifer continued, her voice colder now, "we were never meant to be part of this world. We were never supposed to die, not really." I stepped back, my legs trembling. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling that I knew the answer. Jennifer's eyes flickered for a moment, and then she took a slow step forward, her movements unnervingly calm. "They kept us alive, kept us changing." She paused, the corners of her mouth twitching in what almost seemed like a smile. "But it was never enough. They wanted more." I couldn't breathe. The horror of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a hospital with a dark past, it was a place of experiments. The patients, the ones who were supposed to be gone, weren't dead. They were kept alive through some twisted science, some unnatural force, some desire to defy death. And now they were stuck, trapped in this hospital, unable to die, unable to escape. Jennifer stepped closer, her gaze intensifying. "We were the test subjects. They used us to unlock the secrets of life and death. But what they didn't realize was that they weren't just playing with science. They were opening doors they couldn't close." I could feel the coldness of the room wrap around me, each word she spoke sinking deeper into my bones. I turned away for a moment, trying to compose myself, but the air was thick with dread, and the sound of whispering was growing louder again, swirling around me like a storm. The figures in the room shifted, their movements slow and deliberate. It wasn't just Jennifer anymore. They were all aware. A part of me screamed to run, to leave this place and never look back, but I knew it was pointless. The hospital had claimed me just as it had claimed them. "Why are you showing me this?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What do you want from me?" Jennifer didn't answer at first. Instead, she stepped aside, her eyes still locked on mine as she gestured to the back of the room. My gaze followed her movement. And that's when I saw it, the door. It was unlike any other I had encountered in the hospital. It was old, sealed shut, with strange markings carved into the wood. The air around it felt different, it pulsed as if it were alive, waiting for something. The whispering grew louder, almost frantic now, and then I heard it, a voice clear and distinct in my mind. "Open it, you must open it." I turned to Jennifer, my eyes wide. "What is that?" She didn't respond. Instead, her figure began to fade like smoke in the wind. "It's time for you to see the truth," she said, her voice growing more distant. "You must open the door or you'll never leave." I didn't know what to do. Fear gripped me, but the pull toward the door was irresistible. I couldn't explain it, but I knew I had to open it. There was no turning back. I stepped forward, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. When my fingers touched the cool wood, a jolt of cold shot through me and I gasped, my heart skipping a beat. The door groaned as if it had been waiting for me. Slowly, I turned the handle and pushed it open. The room beyond the door was like nothing I had ever seen. It was vast, larger than any of the rooms in the hospital. The walls were lined with shelves, each holding glass vials and jars filled with strange glowing liquids. There were machines here, too old, rusted, but still active. And in the center of the room there was a large metal table. Lying on the table was a body, no, not a body, a figure. It was difficult to make out in the dim light, but the shape was unmistakable. It was Jennifer Hall, but it wasn't the same Jennifer I had seen before. Her body was pale, almost translucent, and there were tubes and wires connected to her, her form suspended in some kind of stasis. I stumbled back, horrified. The truth hit me like a physical blow. They had been experimenting on her. They had kept her alive, trapped in some kind of limbo. She wasn't dead, but she wasn't truly alive either. She had been a test subject in a horrific experiment to cheat death, to transcend the natural order of life. And as I looked around the room, I realized that Jennifer was not the only one. The shelves were lined with other bodies, others who had been kept alive in this twisted experiment. The hospital had never been abandoned. It had simply been forgotten, its true purpose buried under layers of lies and deception. I backed away, my breath coming in short gasps. The whispers were deafening now, swirling around me, and I could feel the presence of all those souls, the ones trapped in this place, unable to die, unable to leave. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind me. "You can't leave," Jennifer's voice echoed in my head. "Not anymore." And then I understood. The hospital wasn't just a prison for the dead. It was a prison for those who were never meant to leave, and I was one of them now. The door had opened for a reason. And now that I had seen the truth, there was no turning back. I had thought the hospital was a place of death, but now I knew the truth. It was a place where death didn't exist, and that was far worse. I stood frozen in the dark room, the weight of what I had just uncovered crashing down on me. The door had slammed shut behind me, and the whispering voices, those tortured souls, had grown louder, filling my ears, drowning out everything else. I could feel their eyes on me, the pressure of their presence bearing down with such intensity that it felt like the walls were closing in. Jennifer Hall's body on the table was a sight I would never forget. The tubes and wires connecting her to the machines were a constant reminder of the horrifying truth I just uncovered. She wasn't dead, and neither were the others. They had been kept alive in this twisted, unholy limbo, neither truly alive nor truly dead, and they had never been allowed to leave. It was a fate worse than death, a never-ending nightmare that I couldn't even begin to comprehend. And I realized then I was trapped. I could feel it. The air around me thickened, and the shadows seemed to move. They weren't just shadows, they were the remnants of those who had been lost to this place, the souls of the patients who had been used and discarded. They were all here in this hospital, and they weren't going anywhere. "You shouldn't have opened the door." Jennifer's voice echoed in my mind. It was distant, but it felt as if she were right next to me, whispering in my ear. "Now you know too much, now you'll never leave." The words sent a chill through my body. I tried to move, tried to get away, but my legs felt heavy, like I was wading through water. Every step was harder than the last. I turned around, desperately searching for a way out, but there was nothing. The room stretched on forever, the walls closing in, the shadows creeping toward me. I could hear the machines humming in the background, their cold, mechanical whirring now amplified, echoing in the small room. I looked at Jennifer's body again, my eyes drawn to the sight of her lifeless form. Her skin pale and translucent, her once human features now twisted by whatever experiments had been done to her. The truth was undeniable. She was alive, but at what cost? "Please," I whispered to no one, "I just want to leave. I don't want any part of this." But as the words left my lips, I knew they were meaningless. There was no leaving. The hospital had already claimed me. I turned and fled, running toward the door, hoping to escape, but the door wouldn't budge. It was locked, the metal cold and unyielding beneath my trembling hands. I pounded on it, shouting for anyone to help me, but there was no answer. The whispering voices around me grew louder, more frantic, and I realized they weren't just whispers anymore. They were calls. Calls for help, calls for release. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. There had to be a way out, there had to be. But the longer I stood there, the more I understood. The hospital wasn't just a building. It was a trap for anyone foolish enough to step inside. And the longer I stayed, the more I realized there was no way out. The hospital was alive, and it had no intention of letting me go. And then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps coming from behind me. I turned quickly, my heart pounding in my chest, and there she was again, Jennifer, but this time she wasn't just standing in the doorway. She was moving, she was walking toward me, her eyes still empty and dark, her steps slow but certain. "You've seen what's inside," she said, her voice like ice. "Now you can't leave, you belong to this place now, just like the rest of us." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I tried to run, but my feet felt like they were glued to them. I couldn't move, I couldn't escape. Jennifer took another step forward. Her presence was suffocating, a heavy weight pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. The other patients, those figures from the hallway, from the shadows, emerged from the darkness. They were standing at the edges of the room, their eyes fixed on me, silent, watching. I stumbled back, my chest tight with fear. "What do you want from me?" I gasped, my voice shaky. Jennifer didn't respond right away. She just stood there, her hollow eyes locked on mine. "We were never meant to be free," she said finally, her voice tinged with something like regret. "But now you're part of it too." I took another step back, and that's when I saw it. The wall of the room was moving, shifting like it was alive. I could see the shapes of people, patients, pressing against the walls, their faces distorted, their mouths open in silent screams. It was like the building itself was breathing, pulsing with the life of the trapped souls. I turned and ran again, my heart pounding, but the room kept changing. It wasn't just the walls anymore. The floor was shifting, the lights flickering, and the shadows were reaching out toward me, grabbing at my ankles, pulling me back. I reached the door again, desperate, pulling at the handle, but it was locked. I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but no one was there. The whispering grew louder, and then I heard Jennifer's voice again, clear and cold. "You've made your choice." I froze. Choice. The air felt even heavier now, suffocating. I looked around the room. The patients were closing in, their eyes all on me. The shadows were pulling at my limbs, dragging me toward them. I could feel the cold hands of the lost souls wrapping around my ankles, pulling me down, and then I realized the choice wasn't about leaving, it was about staying. The hospital had claimed me, and now there was no escape. When you uncover a secret buried so deep, it changes you. And once you know there's no going back, the truth is a cage, and now I'm trapped inside it. The suffocating pressure of the hospital, of the shadows that clawed at me, was unbearable. I could feel it in my chest, the sense that the walls were closing in, the whispers growing louder, more frantic, as though they were trying to drown me in their urgency. I tried to move. Tried to pull away from the invisible hands that reached for me, but it was no use. I was trapped. Jennifer's figure loomed in front of me, her hollow eyes boring into mine. The air was thick with an overwhelming sense of dread, and I felt the weight of it settle into my bones. The patients who had once been confined to the corners of the room, who had been standing silently watching, were now closing in, their movements slow but purposeful. They were like ghosts, like the echoes of the hospital's past, lingering in the present. Jennifer's voice broke through the chaos. "You wanted the truth," she said, her voice calm, almost serene, like she was speaking from a place far beyond the horrors of the hospital. "Well, now you have it, and now you'll understand why we can't leave." I didn't want to understand, I didn't want to know, but her words echoed in my mind louder than the whispers that surrounded me. The truth about this place, about the experiments, about the souls trapped here. "You're part of it now," Jennifer continued. "You've seen what we've become, what they made us, and you can never walk away from that." The room seemed to shift around me, the walls narrowing, the shadows stretching longer. The figures, the patients, they were moving closer, pressing against me, their eyes vacant and lost, but their presence overwhelming. I tried to back away, but the room seemed to constrict around me, the air thickening with the weight of their collective gaze. "What did they do to you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, my heart pounding in my chest. "Why are you still here? Why can't you leave?" Jennifer's face twisted, a flicker of emotion, pain perhaps, or regret passing through her eyes. She took a step closer to me, and for a moment I could have sworn I saw a trace of humanity in her. But it was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared. "They didn't just keep us alive," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the whispers. "They made us into something else, something unnatural. They took our souls, trapped them here in this place. We were never meant to be here, but now we can't escape." The truth hit me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just a hospital. It was a prison, a place where the boundaries between life and death had been torn apart, where souls were bound to the hospital, unable to pass into the afterlife. These patients, these lost souls, had been kept alive by unnatural means, experiments, a grotesque pursuit of immortality. And now, they were trapped forever. The room spun around me, and I felt dizzy, like I was losing my grip on reality. I stumbled backward, my mind racing, trying to make sense of the horrors Jennifer was revealing. "How can I escape?" I gasped. "How do I leave this place?" Jennifer looked at me, and for a moment I thought I saw pity in her eyes. "You can't escape, not now, not after you've seen what they've done. You wanted to know the truth, but the price of knowledge is steep." I looked around the room again. The patients were closing in. The shadows were swallowing the light, and the whispers were becoming deafening. "I didn't ask for this," I whispered, more to myself than to her. Jennifer stepped closer, her voice soft, almost mournful. "You did, whether you knew it or not. You opened the door, you saw what they were doing, and now you're part of it." I couldn't breathe. The room was so cold now, colder than I had ever felt before. My limbs were frozen, my heart racing in my chest. I could feel the darkness creeping in, threatening to swallow me whole. "You'll never leave," Jennifer repeated, her voice echoing in my mind. "Not unless you choose to become like us." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, to tear myself away from this place, but I knew it was too late. There was no running from what I had uncovered. The hospital was no longer just a building. It was a part of me now. And I was a part of it. The other patients moved closer, their eyes empty, their bodies decayed but still somehow alive. They were part of the hospital, part of the twisted experiments that had been conducted here. And now they were part of me too. I could feel it, the weight of their souls, their suffering pressing down on me, binding me to this place. "You're one of us now," Jennifer said softly, her eyes locking onto mine. "And there's no going back." I closed my eyes, trying to block out the whispers, trying to block out the overwhelming presence of the lost souls around me. But it didn't work. I could feel them. They were inside me, their pain, their confusion. They had become a part of me, and I had become a part of them. The hospital had claimed me just as it had claimed Jennifer and the others, and now there was no escape. I opened my eyes, and Jennifer was gone. The room was empty. The patients had vanished. The whispers stopped, but the feeling remained, the heavy weight of the truth, of the hospital, of the souls trapped within it. I wasn't alone. I never would be again. I had crossed the threshold, and now the hospital was my prison. And it would never let me go. When you're standing at the edge, when the darkness is closing in and the truth is more terrifying than any nightmare, you're forced to make a choice. And for me, that choice was the hardest decision I would ever make. The room was silent now. The cold, suffocating air that had filled it only moments ago had settled, leaving behind a sense of stillness, an eerie calm that was almost worse than the chaos. I stood in the center of the room, heart pounding, sweat dripping down my face, unable to move or speak. The truth of what Jennifer had said still echoed in my mind. "You're one of us now." I couldn't grasp it. I couldn't accept it. The hospital, the patients, Jennifer. They weren't just victims of some twisted experiment, they were bound here by forces beyond my comprehension. They had been turned into something more, something other, and now I was a part of it. I had crossed the line, opened the door, and seen the truth that no one was supposed to see. And now I couldn't leave, but there had to be a way out, there had to be. My mind raced with possibilities, with plans of escape, of breaking free from this nightmare. But deep down I knew the truth. I wasn't just trapped in the hospital physically. I was trapped in its curse, its dark web of forgotten souls. I had seen too much, learned too much. There was no leaving without paying the price. The whispers were still there, faint but persistent. They had become part of me now, too, wrapping themselves around my thoughts, whispering their pain and despair into my mind. And then I heard her voice again, Jennifer's voice, distant but clear. "You have a choice." I turned, but there was no one there. The shadows in the room shifted, twisting like smoke, as though the very darkness was alive, watching me. It was then that I realized I wasn't just hearing her voice. It was inside me now. Her voice, the voices of the other patients, were all intertwined in my mind. Their collective whispers filling the empty space. "A choice," I whispered, my voice shaky. "What kind of choice?" Jennifer's voice was louder now, clearer. "You can become one of us. You can take your place here in the hospital, where you will live forever in the limbo we've been trapped in. You will never die. You will never leave. You will be free from pain. But at what cost?" The offer was tempting. To escape the pain, to never grow old, to never suffer again. It was what everyone in this place had been promised, but at what cost? The moment I'd stepped into this hospital, I had become entangled in its web of horror, its experiments, and its cursed inhabitants. And now it wanted me to join them, to become a part of it. But what would I be? Would I lose myself, my humanity, just as Jennifer and the others had? I shook my head. I can't be like you." My voice cracked, and for a moment, I almost believed my own words. "I'm not like you, I'm not a part of this." But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I was part of this now. I had crossed a line that could never be undone. The whispers, the shadows, the dark presence of the hospital, it was all inside me. I could feel it creeping through my veins, wrapping around my soul. And still the choice remained. "There's another path," Jennifer's voice said softly, almost like a plea. "You don't have to stay. You can leave, you can escape, but it will cost you something far worse than you can imagine." I paused, confusion swirling in my chest. "What do you mean? What else is there? What choice do I have left?" "You can go," she replied, her voice soft, almost sympathetic. "But if you leave, you will never truly be free. The hospital will follow you, the curse will follow you, and it will never let you go, not until it gets what it wants from you." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What does it want?" I whispered, barely able to speak the words. "It wants you," she said simply. "It wants you to become like us, to join the endless cycle of suffering and immortality. But if you try to run, it will hunt you. It will never stop. It will take your soul." The weight of her words pressed down on me like a vice. The hospital was alive, yes, but it was more than that. It had a purpose. It had its own hunger. And I, like Jennifer and the others, had become part of its endless, twisted cycle. The choice was before me, clear and terrible. Stay in the hospital, live forever, but lose myself to the curse, or escape but never be free, always hunted by the dark force that controlled this place. Neither choice was easy. Neither choice promised peace. "What happens if I don't choose?" I asked, my voice trembling. Jennifer's figure appeared before me again, her presence filling the room like an oppressive weight. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she simply stared at me, her eyes empty and sad. Finally, she spoke. "Then it chooses for you." I didn't need to ask what that meant. The hospital, the darkness that had consumed it, would choose for me. It would drag me into its depths, force me into the never-ending cycle of its twisted existence. There would be no escape, not for me, not for anyone. I looked around the room again, the shadows creeping toward me, the whispers growing louder, and I knew I had to make a choice. And it wasn't just about whether I stayed or ran. It was about what kind of person I wanted to be. Did I want to be like them, like the patients who had been trapped here for eternity? Or did I want to escape, knowing I could never truly be free? My hands shook as I reached for the door, and for the first time since I'd stepped into this cursed place, I realized what I had to do. There was no easy way out. There was no perfect answer, but I had to choose. And when I opened that door, I knew it was the last time I would ever be able to walk away from the hospital and the truth that it held. You can't outrun the past, and no matter how far you run, the darkness you've uncovered will follow you until it consumes you. The door creaked open slowly, the soft groan of the hinges echoing in the heavy silence of the hospital. I stepped through it, my legs weak, my heart pounding in my chest. The air felt thick with tension, suffocating, like the walls of the building were pushing in on me. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think, but I had to move. I had made my choice. It wasn't the one I wanted. It wasn't the one I thought I'd ever make, but there was no turning back now. The hospital had offered me immortality, a chance to join the endless cycle of the damned, to live forever in the twisted existence of the patients who had been trapped here. Or I could run, leave the hospital, and escape its grip, at least for a while. but the price was steep. I would never truly be free. The hospital would chase me, hunting me down until I gave in. Until it claimed me. I didn't want to be a part of it. I didn't want to become one of them, the souls that roamed these halls, lost and broken. But even as I walked away, I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, the whispers following me like an invisible force. As I made my way down the hallway, the hospital felt different. The air seemed colder, heavier. The walls seemed to close in around me, and the flickering lights above cast long, distorted shadows that stretched out into the darkness. Every step I took felt like I was being pulled back, like something was reaching out for me, trying to drag me back into its grip. I could hear the whispers again, distant but growing louder. I spun around, my breath coming in shallow gasps. There was no one behind me. The hall was empty, just like it had been the last time. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, watching me. I reached the exit doors, my pulse quickening as I placed my hand on the cold metal handle. The air outside would be a relief. The fresh air, the open sky. I could finally escape. I could be free. But as I pulled the door open, a sudden, intense wave of cold hit me. It wasn't the cold of the night air, it was something far more unnatural. It felt like the hospital itself was trying to keep me in. The door slammed shut behind me and I jumped. My heart racing as I spun around, but when I looked back, there was nothing. No one, just the empty hallway stretching on endlessly in the dim light. I took a step forward, shaking my head. No, I couldn't go back, I couldn't. But as I walked toward the exit again, the whispers grew louder, their urgency growing. You can't escape. You belong here. My steps slowed. The door was right there. I reached for the handle again, but it wouldn't open. It was locked, the metal cold beneath my hand, refusing to budge. No, I stepped back, panic rising in my chest. The hospital had done this to me. It had given me a choice, but it was never a real choice. No matter what I decided, it would never let me go. And then I saw it. In the distance, a figure was standing in the shadow. The same figure I had seen before. Jennifer, she was watching me, her expression unreadable. She wasn't alone this time. There were others with her, other patients. Their faces twisted, their eyes hollow, staring at me from the darkness. Why? I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. Why can't I leave? Jennifer took a step forward, her movements slow and deliberate. You can't leave because you never really left, she said, her voice calm, but there was a sadness there. You're part of the hospital now, just like us, and you always will be. I took a step back, shaking my head. I don't want this, I never asked for this. Jennifer's eyes softened, a flicker of something almost human passing through them. None of us asked for it, she said. But it doesn't matter. The hospital has taken us and it's taken you too. I felt a cold, hollow emptiness inside me as I looked around at the other patients, their eyes still locked on me, their bodies contorted as if frozen in time. They weren't dead, they weren't alive, they were stuck, trapped in this hellish cycle of existence, and now I was a part of it. You can't leave, Jennifer repeated, her voice echoing in my mind. Not unless you accept it. I backed away, hands trembling. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Accept it, join us, become like us. I couldn't bear it, the thought of becoming one of them, of losing myself, of becoming trapped in this twisted existence forever. I wouldn't, but as I turned to run again, the hallway stretched out before me, endless and dark. The door was still there, locked tight. The hospital wasn't going to let me go, not now, not ever. Please, I whispered, my voice breaking. Let me go, please, but no one answered. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. I could hear the echoes of the patients, their voices blending together, becoming a single horrible sound that filled my ears. The darkness around me seemed to grow deeper, thicker. It swallowed everything in its path. And then Jennifer's voice cut through the noise, clear and calm. You can't run forever. The hospital is inside you now. It always will be. I stopped. I couldn't go on. The weight of her words crashed down on me, and for the first time since I'd come to this place, I realized the truth. There was no escaping, no leaving, no way out. The hospital had claimed me. It had claimed my soul, and I had become a part of its endless cycle. The darkness would always follow me, no matter where I went. When the past is all you have, and the future is a promise of endless torment, there's nothing left but to accept the inevitable. But what happens when even eternity can't erase the scars? I stood there, the weight of Jennifer's words pressing down on me, heavier than the darkness around me. She was right. The hospital had taken me. It had claimed my soul, woven it into its very walls, its every corner, its every shadow. The truth hit me harder than anything I had experienced before. There was no escape. No exit, no way out of the prison that I had willingly walked into, hoping to uncover answers. But now I was part of the very thing I had tried to understand. The patients, those lost souls, had been here for what felt like forever, trapped in the same nightmare, bound by the same curse. They hadn't just been experiments, they had been changed, forced into an eternal existence that was neither life nor death. And now I had joined them. The hospital had chosen me, and I had no choice but to accept my place. I could feel the hospital's presence around me, its walls closing in, its whispers growing louder, their voices merging into one single overwhelming sound. I could hear them all, the voices of those who had been trapped here long before me. They were calling to me, their whispers a chorus of endless pain. A warning, a plea. I wasn't just hearing them, I was becoming them. I walked down the hall, each step heavier than the last. The shadows in the corners of the room shifted, moving with me as if they were alive, watching me. The walls seemed to pulse with every beat of my heart, as though the building itself was breathing. I had felt it before, but now it was undeniable. The hospital was alive, and it had claimed me. I had no place outside of it now. I reached the old elevator, the one that had once taken me to the basement. The door slid open with a sickening creak, and the stench of mildew and decay hit me like a wave. But I didn't hesitate. I stepped inside, pressing the button for the basement. It was the only place left in this hospital I hadn't fully explored, the only place where I might find the answers I still desperately sought, if there was still anything left to understand. The elevator descended slowly, the sound of the metal groaning under the weight of its ancient machinery. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes for a moment, trying to calm the frantic thoughts swirling in my mind. What was I supposed to do now? I couldn't leave. I had already been branded by the hospital. My existence was now intertwined with it. The whispers, the shadows, they were all a part of me. The elevator jolted to a stop, the doors sliding open with a soft hiss. I stepped out, the basement stretching before me. The familiar chill of the air wrapped around me, but now it felt different. It wasn't just the cold of an abandoned building. It was the cold of something unnatural. Something that had been preserved in this place for far too long. The basement was vast, darker than anything I had seen in the hospital. The walls were lined with shelves, full of old equipment, boxes, and crates that had been left untouched for years. The floor was cracked and uneven, and the scent of rot hung in the air. But what stood out most were the rows of beds, just like the ones in the hospital above. Only these were different. The sheets were torn and stained. The pillows deflated. The beds were empty, yet the room felt alive, as if something had just been waiting for me to step inside. I walked toward the far corner of the basement, where the light was dimmer, and there in the shadows I saw a door. It was unlike any door I had seen before. This one was old, weathered, but more importantly, it was locked. My eyes locked on it, and the pull I felt toward it was irresistible. I approached, the whispers in my head growing louder, the voices of the patients urging me forward. I reached for the door handle, my fingers trembling. As soon as I touched it, I felt a surge of energy, cold, dark energy that shot through my body. I gasped, pulling my hand away instinctively. The door seemed to pulse as though it was alive, waiting. But I knew without a doubt that this was the heart of the hospital's curse. The answers I had been seeking were behind that door, but they weren't answers I was ready for. I grabbed the handle again, this time with more force, and the door creaked open, revealing the room beyond. The sight that greeted me was one I would never be able to forget. The room was filled with rows of glass tanks, all containing bodies. At first, I thought they were just preserved remains, the remnants of failed experiments. But as I moved closer, I realized that the bodies weren't decayed. They were alive. The tanks were filled with some kind of liquid. And the figures inside, patients I assumed, were floating, their faces obscured by the liquid. Their eyes, though, were open, watching. I stepped closer to one of the tanks. The figure inside was a man, his body pale and emaciated, but his eyes were alive, filled with a mixture of confusion and fear. I pressed my hand against the glass and his eyes snapped toward me, locking onto mine. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The liquid in the tank rippled, and I could feel the presence of the others, all of them watching me, waiting for something. "How long have you been here?" I whispered. My voice hoarse, but no one answered. They couldn't. The silence was unbearable, and the air grew colder still. I turned around, my gaze falling on a desk at the far end of the room. There, amidst the piles of paperwork, was a journal. I moved toward it, but as I did, I felt a presence behind me. I turned quickly, but there was nothing. No one, just the tanks, the bodies, and the empty, oppressive silence. I reached for the journal, flipping it open. It was filled with notes, some written in a hurried hand, others in a neat, precise script. The further I read, the more I understood. This wasn't just a hospital, it was an experiment. A twisted, God-forsaken experiment to cheat death, to trap souls and bodies that could never die. The patients who had been here, the ones I had seen, had been part of it. The doctors, the scientists, had they known what they were doing? Or were they just as much victims of the hospital as the patients? The final pages of the journal were written in a frenzied, almost incoherent script. It was clear that whoever had written it had been struggling with their sanity. The last entry read, "They are awake, the ones in the tanks, they remember, they know, they see, and now they will never let me go. I can feel them, watching me. The hospital has claimed them and it will claim me too. I'm part of it now, there's no escape." I felt my blood run cold. The journal had been written by one of the doctors, the ones who had come before, and now I knew the horrible truth. The hospital wasn't just trapping the patients, it was trapping everyone. It had claimed them and it had claimed me, and now it was waiting for the final piece of its twisted puzzle to be completed. I dropped the journal, my hands shaking. The coldness in the room had become unbearable and the whispers were growing louder. It wants me. I turned and ran. But I knew it was too late. The hospital was always one step ahead, and now I was part of it forever. When you've crossed the line between life and death, there's no turning back. The only way out is a path that leads you deeper into the darkness. I ran, my heart thundering in my chest, but with every step it felt like the ground was pulling me back. The hospital, this cursed place, was no longer just a building. It had become part of me, its darkness creeping into my very soul. I had seen the truth, uncovered its deepest secrets, and now it was coming for me. There was no escaping it. Not now, not after everything I had witnessed. I reached the elevator, my hand shaking as I pressed the button for the main floor. But the moment the doors slid open, I knew it was no use. The air was thick with an unnatural cold, the kind that made your skin crawl, the kind that filled you with dread and unease. The whispering had started again, rising from the depths of the building, filling the space with voices I couldn't quite make out. But I could feel them. They were all around me, pressing in, suffocating me. The elevator doors shut with a loud clang, but it didn't matter. I could still hear the whispers. I could feel the weight of the hospital's grip on me. The more I tried to fight it, the stronger it became. Every inch of the building felt alive, and I was a part of it now. The patients, the lost souls who had once walked these halls, hadn't left, and neither had I. The elevator came to a screeching halt, throwing me off balance. I stumbled out, my head spinning. The hallway in front of me was empty, but I knew better than to think I was alone. I could feel them watching, waiting, their eyes on me from the shadows. They were never far behind. The hospital had claimed me, and now I was just another part of its endless, never-ending cycle. I walked down the hall, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls seemed to close in around me, the flickering lights above casting long, distorted shadows. I reached the old wards, the ones I had visited so many times before, and the door that led to the East Wing, the place where it all started. I could feel the pull. It was irresistible. I stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, but the room was different now. It was no longer just a collection of empty beds and abandoned rooms. It felt alive, alive in a way that was unnatural, dark. There was a weight to the air, a heaviness that made it almost impossible to breathe. I could hear the whispers growing louder now, a chorus of voices that seemed to come from every corner of the room. They were all speaking at once, their words blending into a cacophony of sound that made it hard to think, to concentrate. And then I saw her again, Jennifer Hall. She was standing at the far end of the room, her figure barely visible in the darkness. But this time she wasn't alone. There were others with her, more patients, their eyes hollow and empty, their bodies twisted and contorted by the experiments that had been performed on them. They were all standing in the shadows, watching me, their eyes filled with the same emptiness that had once consumed Jennifer. "You're here," Jennifer said softly, her voice echoing in my mind. "You can't escape." I stepped back, my heart racing. "No," I whispered. "I'm not like you, I'm not one of you." Jennifer's eyes flickered, a faint hint of sadness crossing her face. But then, she took a step forward, her expression hardening. "You are, you always were, and now you will be part of this place just like us." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, but there was nowhere to go. The walls seemed to close in around me, and I could feel the weight of the patients, the souls trapped here, pressing down on me. I couldn't escape, not anymore. "You've seen the truth," Jennifer continued, her voice soft but filled with an eerie finality. "You can't go back. The hospital doesn't let go, and neither do we." I turned, desperate to run, but as I did, the shadows in the room shifted. The hallway stretched out before me, but it was no longer the same hallway I had known. The walls seemed to move, and the door, the one I had thought would lead me to freedom, was gone. It had been replaced by a wall of solid stone. I couldn't get out. I reached for the door handle, but there was no door. The hospital was toying with me, trapping me in its maze, in its endless cycle. The whispers were growing louder, more urgent, until they were all I could hear. The voices of the lost souls, the patients who had once been living, now nothing more than memories, trapped in the hospital's grasp. "You're one of us now," Jennifer's voice echoed in my mind. "You'll never leave, not unless you accept it." I spun around, my breath coming in short gasps. The patients were closing in on me. Their eyes locked on mine, their faces twisted in silent screams. But they weren't real. They couldn't be. They were just echoes of the hospital's past, trapped in a cycle of suffering that would never end. I dropped to my knees, my hands pressed to my temples, trying to block out the voices. I had to leave, I had to escape, but the truth was I had already accepted it. I had crossed the line. I had opened the door, and now the hospital had claimed me. There was no running. There was no freedom. I could hear Jennifer's voice again, but this time it wasn't in my mind. She was standing behind me, her presence like a shadow, cold and suffocating. You are part of this place now, you've seen it all and there's no going back. I turned slowly, looking up at her. Her face was no longer filled with sadness, but with something darker, something colder. And in that moment, I realized that she was right. There was no going back. The hospital had claimed me just as it had claimed all the others before me. And now, I was part of its eternal cycle. I was just another soul trapped in the darkness, lost to time, unable to escape. Some doors should never be opened. Some truths are better left undiscovered. But once you step across that threshold, you can never return. The hospital has claimed me, and now it's your turn to decide. The room was silent, and yet it wasn't. I could hear the whispers of the past, the voices of those who had come before me, all trapped within these walls. The shadows danced at the edge of my vision, the haunting eyes of the patients locked on me, their presence a constant, suffocating weight on my chest. I could feel them even now. I had become one of them, just another lost soul in the never-ending cycle of this hospital. I had thought I could escape. I had thought that if I just found the right door, the right path, I could break free. But now I understood. There was no escape. There never was. The hospital had already claimed me. It had claimed my soul, my body, my very existence. I stood at the center of the room, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, the forgotten souls who had once been like me, alive, hopeful, unaware of the darkness lurking beneath the surface. And now I was one of them. I was part of the curse, part of the hospital's twisted legacy. Jennifer's figure loomed in front of me again, her eyes empty, her expression cold. She had seen it all. She had been here for far too long, and now I was here with her. "You don't have to run anymore," she said, her voice calm, almost comforting. "You belong to this place now. You've crossed the line. There's no way back." Her words hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't flinch. I didn't need to hear them anymore. I had already accepted the truth. There was no running from the hospital, no running from what it had turned me into. I was a part of it now, and as the whispers surrounded me, as the darkness closed in, I realized something else. The hospital wasn't just a building. It wasn't just a prison for the lost souls. It was alive. It was feeding on us, trapping us in its web, turning us into shadows of our former selves. And now the hospital was waiting for its next victim. It was waiting for you. I felt the presence behind me, other patients, other souls trapped in the cycle, their hollow eyes watching me, waiting for me to make the final decision. It wasn't just about accepting the hospital's curse anymore. It was about inviting someone else into it. You, if you're reading this, you've crossed the threshold just like I did. You've been drawn into this story, into this hospital, and now you're part of it. The whispers are already there, calling to you. You've seen what happens to those who try to escape, to those who uncover the truth. And now you can either walk away, pretending it's all just a nightmare, or you can choose to step into the darkness and see where it takes you. The choice is yours, but be warned, once you open the door, you can never go back. Once the hospital has claimed you, it will never let you go. Do you want to know the truth? Do you want to understand what happens to those who step into the darkness? Then step forward. But remember, once you enter, there's no leaving. The hospital is always waiting for its next patient.